So the Chiefs made a drastic change this season, finally doing what opposing defenses have been daring them to do, and not only is it working, but it's changed the dynamic of the Chiefs' offense. And in this video, I'll break down what that is as I take a deep dive into the biggest surprises and concerns for this team through 5 weeks of the season. But first, how about those? All right, through 5 weeks of the 2024 NFL season, as the Chiefs head into their bye week, I did some digging, and I have some good news, some bad news, along with some pretty surprising findings from the Chiefs and how they've operated so far. Of course, I'm going to state the obvious here. The Chiefs are undefeated and the clear 1 seed at the moment in the AFC. So there's a lot to love and be grateful for, but for the sake of this video, I am going to focus more on the surprising things I've found as well as what can be improved upon after the bye week. Let's start with the defense. Before I get to the biggest surprise, it's worth shouting out a couple players along the D-line. Of course, we know that Chris Jones is dominant, an absolute game wrecker. He's racked up the most pressures on the team with 28 and has been double-teamed more than anybody else. He's wrecked multiple plays in ways that also don't show up on the stat sheet. And I'm not going to dive into all that, but just know this, Chris Jones is arguably, or inarguably rather, the most important player on the defense, and it's not close. But there's some other players worth shouting out here. George Karlaftis has racked up 19 pressures himself, though I think a pleasant surprise on the D-line through 5 weeks is Tershawn Wharton. This man has a 16.1 win percentage, which is second most on the line, only behind the CEO of Sack Nation, and among all interior defensive linemen who have played 50% of snaps, that 16.1 win percentage is third best out of them all. The only two better are Cameron Hayward and then, of course, the GOAT, Chris Jones. But man, this has been a career year for Turk so far. Just last year, through 17 games, he had 23 pressures all season, but through 5 games this year, he already has 15. So it's safe to say Turk has recovered from his torn ACL that he sustained a couple years ago, and he is back at a full go. Then another great surprise on defense is Jaylen Watson. He's playing very well as the team's cornerback too. It was a big question mark heading into the season, as he had off-season shoulder surgery. You didn't have anybody else really stepping up, but it is clear Jaylen Watson is CB2, and if you look at this graph, you want to see your cornerbacks in the upper right quadrant, and if you do, that means they are sticky in coverage and have a nice on-ball grade per PFF, and both Jaylen Watson and Trent McDuffie are in there. I mean, Trent McDuffie was a given. He's to be expected. He's one of the best corners, top 5 in the NFL, but Jaylen Watson being over in that quadrant as well shows how great he is playing. Then just look at this. Tyler Gorse shared some next-gen stats that shows the top 6 cornerbacks as far as passer rating allowed when targeted, and they have to play a minimum of 145 coverage snaps to qualify. Well, the top 6 on this list is Riley Moss, Jaylen Watson, Stephon Gilmore, Christian Gonzalez, Christian Benford, and PS2. So the fact that Jaylen Watson is top 5 in the NFL in passer rating allowed when targeted is just incredible and shows how well he really is playing. Now, while Watson and Wharton have been great, I think the biggest surprise to me out of all is the run defense as a whole. Through week 5, the Chiefs have given up the 4th fewest yards per carry and the 3rd fewest rushing yards per game. They're averaging 88.4 yards allowed per game, which is by far the lowest we've seen from them in quite some time, and they would be ranked even higher if not for Lamar Jackson running like a psychopath in week 1. Now, when you take a look at how they've fared in particular against opposing teams' RB1s this season, the only conclusion you can come to is they are elite. I mean, this is insane stuff. Derrick Henry was held to just 46 yards in week 1. Zach Moss had only 34 yards week 2. Bijan Robinson was limited to 31 in week 3. J.K. Dobbins was stifled for 32 yards week 4. And most recently, Alvin Kamara was bottled up for 26 measly yards in week 5. In total, they've allowed 169 yards on 66 carries to opposing RB1s, which is just 2.6 yards per carry. On top of that, the longest rush they've given up to a running back this year is 12, and they are the 2nd best rush defense in DVOA. So yeah, they're limiting explosive plays and suffocating running backs, which is a big reason as to why the Chiefs are 5-0. This is so surprising because on average, since Spags took over in 2019, the Chiefs have been in the back half of the pack, outside of 2022, to be fair, in rushing yards allowed per game, which you can clearly see here on the screen. But again, this season, they have been elite at stopping the run. Then if we shift to the other side of the ball, the run game for the offense is probably the most surprising thing as well. But before I get to the details of that, it's pretty encouraging to say the least. I do want to quickly glance at how the Chiefs fare as far as DVOA goes. As a quick reminder, DVOA is defense adjusted value over average, which is a stat that measures a team's success by comparing each play to the league average. And with that being said, the Chiefs are third in total DVOA, only behind the Ravens and Vikings. Then KC's defense is actually 10th overall, though again, their run defense is second. And for the offense, they are 5th at the moment, which is a little surprising when you see the offense 5th, the defense 10th. When you think about these games, how they've been played, and the defense seemingly carrying this team at times in crucial situations. But when you actually look at how well the offense has been able to move the ball down the field, it makes more sense. There's just one big problem, or maybe a 1A and 1B problem on offense that we're going to get to. The good news is both of these problems are in theory correctable, and we will get to those in a moment, as well as Kareem Hunt being a huge bright spot on the offense. But before I do, I've got to tell you about the delicious sponsor of today's video, Good Chop. They offer fully customizable boxes of high-quality meat and seafood, and they'll deliver it right to your front door on your schedule. The products are also vacuum sealed and flash frozen at peak freshness, so you can stock your freezer and cook when you want. That is exactly what me and my family do, and we love Good Chop because we eat a lot of protein, a ton of protein with every single meal, and the fact that we can choose from over 70 high-quality cuts and have it shipped right to our front door to save both time and money is incredibly helpful. We've been using Good Chop for well over a year now, and they have been fantastic every single time. We recently grilled their New York strip and ribeye. Both were incredible, along with the crab legs for a little surf and turf. My girls get excited over the thick cut bacon. They don't fight over it, but it gets close. The chicken wings were a hit while watching some football on Sunday, and the steelhead trout made for a tasty lunch. I also love that Good Chop sources its meat and seafood from American farms and fisheries. Their meat comes with no antibiotics or added hormones ever, and they also believe in their quality so much that they offer a 100% money-back guarantee. So either love Good Chop or get your money back. And to get your box of customized, high-quality American meat and seafood, as well as show support for the channel, go to goodchop.com/YouTube and use code HBTC130, or click the link in the description down below to get $130 off across your first 4 boxes today. Again, that's goodchop.com/YouTube and use code HBTC130 to get $130 off across your first 4 boxes. All right, there are 2 notable issues on the Chiefs offense that I definitely need to get into, but there's a very surprising development on offense, along with a major bright spot via the most surprising addition that we got to get to first. The surprising addition, of course, has been Kareem Hunt, based on his history with the team and how he ended up coming back full circle, has been awesome. And while I believe the team thought Kareem would be helpful given their injuries and just how the running back room looked as a whole, I'm not sure they expected how helpful Kareem would really be. This is a small sample size, okay, to be fair, but in his 2 games so far, Kareem has 41 carries for 171 yards. So he's averaging roughly 20 carries a game for 85.5 yards. And this is a tough ask for any running back, but if he was able to keep that pace up through season's end, Kareem could reach somewhere around 1,200 rushing yards. The craziest part about that is Hunt didn't even play in a game until week 4. And if you look at all running backs since the 2021 season when a 17th game was added, the only 3 running backs to reach 1,200 or more rushing yards from week 4 on were Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, and Derrick Henry. Meanwhile, Nick Chubb and Christian McCaffrey were the only 2 to break 1,100 yards. This is mind-blowing when you consider the fact that Hunt was teamless. He had no training camp, no preseason, and wasn't even signed until week 3. He was on the practice squad for a week, then signed to the active roster the following week leading up to week 4, and hasn't looked back since. Now, this is pretty interesting. When you line up Pacheco's stats through 2 games, he played basically 2 full games this season before getting injured, and then you compare that to Hunt's 2 games so far this season, they are very similar in many categories, save one that's pretty crucial. Hunt is averaging 4.2 yards per carry compared to Pacheco's 4.0. The yards after contact is also similar if you base it on the fact that Hunt has had about 6 more rushes than Pacheco, but here's where it gets very interesting. Kareem Hunt is forcing a missed tackle every 4 carries compared to Pacheco forcing a missed tackle every 17. Hunt already has 10 forced missed tackles in 41 carries compared to Pacheco's 2 in 34. This is probably the biggest difference I see in these two running backs. Hunt's vision and ability to pick up that extra yard or two falling forward in the process has been a breath of fresh air for the team's run game, especially on 3rd or 4th and short. Look at this play in particular here, for example. This was a 4th and 1, and if Hunt doesn't make that man miss, getting skinny as he falls forward, they do not convert here. Pacheco is solid though, don't get me wrong. He's the more effective dual threat of the two in the passing game, though I think Kareem Hunt is still going to get more acclimated to the offense as time goes on. Either way, I am honestly very excited to get Pop back and healthy for a very solid 1-2 combo between he and Kareem Hunt. I can't wait for it. It's not a knock to Pacheco when I'm comparing these stats, but I am very surprised at how well Kareem has been performing and his ability to make men miss. It's been just very needed, and it's helped the offense greatly. Now, to keep the convo going around the run game, I think this is the biggest surprise out of everything I've discussed in today's video so far. The identity, the very identity of the Chiefs offense has actually shifted for the first time in the Mahomes era, at least through the first 5 games of this season. Look at this. Every year since 2017, the Chiefs offense has clearly favored the pass. Now, I know Mahomes didn't start till 2018, but I did include 2017 because Kareem Hunt was on the team then, even though Alex Smith was the quarterback. Even so, during that year, 2017, KC was 21st in run play percentage, calling a run around 40% of the time. And honestly, that's been the norm for the Chiefs offense since Mahomes took over as well. You run the ball around 38% of the time and pass the rest around, 62 or so? And this had the Chiefs at bottom 5 in run play percentage every year, with them being top 5 to top 10 in pass play percentage every year. But this year, it's way different. Through these 5 games in 2024, the Chiefs are 12th in rush play percentage, running the ball 47.02% of the time and passing just 52.98% of the time. That's 21st in the NFL in the pass play, 12th again in the run game. The first time in the Mahomes era, they are in the top half on opposite sides of the spectrum. Technically, yes, they are still pass heavy on offense, but it's just extremely close to being balanced for the first time in the Mahomes era, a clear shift in how the offense is functioning compared to years prior. There's probably more reasons than I could even begin to comprehend for this, but one of them is because teams keep playing too high safeties and giving the Chiefs light boxes, daring them to run the ball, and this year, they are finally saying, okay, we will run the ball. And they've not only been consistent at doing this, but they've been running with great success. I talked about this in a recent video, but the Chiefs have been one of the most successful teams running the ball. Through 5 weeks, they are currently 3rd in rushing success rate, only behind the Rams and the Lions. And this is a big deal for a couple of reasons. This does take pressure off of Mahomes, who is self-admittingly struggling a little bit, and it's going to start to open up play action passes even more. Per Next Gen Stats, the Chiefs offense featured play action on 27.3% of dropbacks in their latest matchup against the Saints, and that had Mahomes finishing 10 of 12 for 167 yards and the unfortunate interception in the red zone thrown to Juju. But this is what is so interesting to me. On play action passes, Mahomes' yards per attempt was 13.9, and without play action, 6.1. So play action is clearly working to help them push the ball more aggressively down the field, because the run game is something teams now actually have to take serious. And that's not a knock at Pacheco, that's just because they are running the ball much more. You have the best interior trio on the O-line probably of any team in the NFL, so run the ball and it's freaking working. And seeing Mahomes throwing the ball twice as far on play action, that is definitely encouraging and something I really hope continues. Now, let's get to the not so great stuff, okay? It's been a more mediocre season, to say the least, for Patrick Mahomes and company in the pass game. Through 5 weeks from a statistical standpoint, he's completed 69% of his passes for 1,235 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. And I don't think this trend continues, but let's just say it does. It's not gonna, but he's averaging out to have or finish the season with 4,200 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 20 interceptions. Don't think that is going to carry on. It's going to decrease. But right now, Mahomes is tied for first with Will Levis and Anthony Richardson with those 6 interceptions, which is pretty wild to see. Then overall on offense, KC is 9th on converting third downs, which is pretty good, 11th in yards per game, 15th in rushing yards per game, and 8th in passing yards per game. So they are average to above average in moving the ball from an offensive standpoint. Well, look at this disgusting stat. Through 5 weeks, they are currently the 3rd worst team at scoring touchdowns in the red zone, getting a touchdown only 38.89% of the time. That is 30th in the NFL, with only the Dolphins and Patriots being worse. So, if the Chiefs can just fix this issue alone, they will go from the 14th highest scoring offense that averages 23.6 points per game all the way up into the top 5 easily. This is correctable in my opinion, and having a more threatening run presence is only going to help them pound the rock down there in the red zone. But again, it's also going to allow opportunities for play action passes. Part of the issue, I believe, is they've lost 3 major weapons on offense, and 2 of them being receivers: Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, and Isiah Pacheco, and that's affected more than we probably know in the passing game. They planned all offseason long to have a particular game plan moving forward, and they've since been trying to adapt and evolve this entire 5 weeks as their major weapons have been falling. Obviously, Hollywood Brown was injured in the preseason, and you had time for that. But the offensive identity has definitely changed from the end of training camp till now. And that's why the early bye week is great timing, in my opinion, and should allow the team more time to scheme players they do have open in the red zone and kind of tweak their playbook a little bit down there. Another problem, though, in the red zone is the damn penalties. I've seen too many times now a holding penalty happen on offense in the red zone that either negates a touchdown or backs them up and creates a deficit they can't overcome, so they end up having to settle for 3 more times than not. Outside of those red zone woes, the only other problem they have to fix ASAP is the turnover problem. The Chiefs have the 4th worst turnover differential in the NFL at -4. And the only 3 teams that are worse: the 2-2 Eagles, the 2-3 Raiders, and the 1-3 Titans. The Chiefs are 5-0 undefeated, and these turnovers have created stressful, close games that the Chiefs can close out because of how well they are coached and the players they have, yes, and then they are pretty rounded as a team overall. But just imagine a world where most of these games feel like the Saints game. The Chiefs remain in control the entire game, and it's never really within reach for their opponents. Well, if they can clean up the turnovers and score a touchdown or 2 in the red zone compared to all the field goals they've been kicking, this is going to make for a very scary Chiefs team down the stretch. And that's why it's so incredible that in spite of the injuries, the red zone struggles, and the turnovers, the Chiefs are still the 1 seed in the AFC and the only undefeated team outside of the Vikings. This should encourage you as a fan and help you see just how scary this team has the potential to be, and I think it's going to happen. But with all that being said, let me know your thoughts on some of the most surprising findings and developments of this team as they head into their bye week. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?